What is up, Gangrene Nation, Gotham City, all my Jets fans? This is Thomas Christopher, aka Tommy Jets, Intercity Jets. This is the Jets Pulse, and this is a very special edition of the Jets Pulse. I'll get to that a little bit later. But first, hey, Jets came up short against the San Francisco 49ers, 32-19, and I do have a very special guest with me to discuss this game. You guys may know him from the Jet Press. It's Justin. Welcome aboard, Justin. How you doing, man?
What's going on, buddy? Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Make sure you guys are following Justin on Twitter as well at Justin TFRIED, and that's on Twitter. And he runs everything over at the Jets Press. Justin, hey man, I need to get your thoughts on this game. First, Jets came up short. They had a good first quarter, and then everything else just kind of seemed to go downhill from there. What are your thoughts and takeaways of this matchup?
Yeah, I feel like in typical Jets fashion, a few things went wrong, and then everything just kind of snowballed. We've unfortunately seen that a lot with this team over the last few years, but the sky's not falling. And I think we've seen a lot of those takeaways after this first game. You're going to get that. It's week one overreactions. The Jets lost by 13 points. Granted, that scoreline is flattering, but they lost by 13 points to the defending NFC champions. The 49ers are a great team. They have a lot more continuity, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, than the Jets do. There are some concerns. There are genuine concerns about this Jets roster moving forward. I think that the run defense is definitely a concern. It was concerning to see that the defensive line didn't get much pressure on Brock Purdy, which was one of the keys going into the game. But one of my bigger takeaways is, hey, man, Aaron Rodgers looks like Aaron Rodgers. The mobility isn't there as much. The escapability is kind of gone. He's never going to be MVP level Aaron Rodgers again, but the Jets don't, in theory, need him to be that. Aaron Rodgers still looked like Aaron Rodgers, and it's kind of a weird position to be in as a Jets fan, thinking, okay, look, there are some flaws with this roster, but hey, we got a quarterback. And it's a bizarre feeling. I haven't felt that way in a while, but that's kind of my biggest takeaway from this game is there's a few things that need to be fixed, but Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers. And if that's the case, the Jets have a chance this year.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think we kind of saw that firsthand, too. We saw Rodgers check out of some plays, especially on some critical third downs. And he was able to make the right reads and get the Jets driving until they eventually, they were up in the first quarter. Jets fans kind of can't forget that. Other than Aaron Rodgers looking great, was there any other surprises or things that you enjoyed seeing out of the team in that matchup?
I was really impressed by the pass protection. That was definitely one of my bigger takeaways as well. I think the run blocking is going to take some time to get there. Elijah Vera Tucker, of course, coming off the torn Achilles. Can't expect him to be 100% right away. They also didn't play in the preseason. So it's, you have three new starters on there. Vera Tucker and Tippmann really didn't play much together last year either. So it's a very new look offensive line. It's going to take some time to gel. But overall, I thought the pass rush or the pass protection held up pretty well against a very talented 49ers pass rush. That was definitely one of my bigger takeaways. The secondary is still good. Sauce Gardner had a great game. I know there was some issues with tackling, and that's going to be an issue. And that was one of my concerns going into the game. But we know that the defense is still very talented, and you hope that they can figure that out. That is Robert Saleh's thing. That's why he's here. But in terms of biggest, I don't even want to call it a surprise because we thought the offensive line would be better, and it was. That was definitely one of the more pleasant takeaways from the game, other than Aaron Rodgers.
No, I absolutely agree. I know everybody kind of had their, I don't want to say question, I guess, yeah, kind of questions because we saw how bad the offensive line last year. It's a lot of new players this year. The big thing has always been health with this offensive line. And so far, so for good, we know that when they're healthy, they can play well against a pretty good defensive front seven. And as to the secondary, I thought they looked great. Michael Carter looked really good again as well, other than one little mishap, which seemed to be a mishap between him and Sauce, where they gave Debo kind of like a free play for, I think, like a 10-yard gain. He had great coverage throughout the night as well. So the secondary has been good. Tony Adams maybe a little shaky, maybe Ashton Davis maybe a little shaky, but hey, they were getting beat in the run game. So stuff like that's definitely going to happen against a good team like the 49ers. But speaking of kind of shakiness, there was some issues with the defense. There was some issues overall. What were your biggest concerns from that game, if you had any?
I definitely would say the run defense because I can chalk up the pass rush to being okay. Look, they have some talent there, and maybe it was, I don't want to just say like an off night. I don't want to just use that excuse, but I'm more confident that the pass rush can be fixed, especially because you do have Haason Reddick, who I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. Hopefully he'll eventually show up. Hopefully that'll eventually get resolved, and he will definitely help the pass rush. I don't think Haason Reddick returning helps the run defense very much, and I don't think, Lecky Fotu is obviously on IR. He'll be back in a few weeks. I don't think that solves everything either. And those were issues that we kind of had going into the season. I do think a lot of the run defense concerns from last year were a bit overblown. The Jets ranked, I believe, 13th in yards per carry allowed, which is not awful by any means. It's around middle of the pack, especially given the fact that the defense was out there like 70% of the time. Yeah, they were facing pretty conservative offenses because of that, but I don't think the run defense was a serious concern last year. Fans just kind of they compared it to the pass defense, which was the best in the NFL. By default, yeah, the run defense is going to look worse, but the run defense wasn't awful. This week one was a problem. And the 49ers are a really good running team, and it goes beyond, of course, Christian McCaffrey. As we saw, Jordan Mason had a huge night. And even outside of Trent Williams, that offensive line isn't great, but the scheme that they have, the 49ers always run the football well with Kyle Shanahan. And I think the Jets were firmly outcoached in that regard. But yeah, I just, I would say that the run defense is probably the biggest concern moving forward because I don't see a ready-made fix for that. And that goes back to a lot of the defensive line moves that the Jets made this offseason, trading away John Franklin-Myers for virtually nothing. They didn't necessarily have to do that. They spun it as they had to do it. The only reason they, quote-unquote, had to do it is because of the other defensive line moves they made. Bringing in Javon Kinlaw, paying him a lot more than Quentin Jefferson to essentially downgrade at that spot. We don't need to harp on the whole Bryce Huff situation with Haason Reddick, but those contracts, Bryce Huff and John Franklin-Myers have a combined cap hit this year of under $10 million. The Jets could have afforded that. They're trying to spin the narrative that they couldn't. They could have afforded that. So I think that the moves that they made on the defensive line this offseason, they've clearly gotten worse in that regard. And it's made even worse because Haason Reddick isn't there. And so all the issues are amplified.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I know I've seen you guys harp on the JFM, which is just that trade. That's one I can't really forgive. There's a lot of other stuff we can kind of overlook there. That's one I just want, especially when JFM came out and was like, hey, the Jets didn't even talk to me about taking a pay cut, and I would have done it. So that's a leader on the defense you got rid of, and a guy who can be versatile. He plays inside and outside when necessary, and he's not maybe the elite run stuffer, but he's good enough and gets that part of the game going to help the rest of the guys as well, knowing their assignments. So I think that was a horrible. Oh man, that one's still gonna irk me for a long time.
He would have saved more money by restructuring his contract. If they were to restructure his contract the way that the Broncos did, they would have saved more money doing that than by trading him. So it makes it's not a cap saving move at all. It makes no sense. I don't know why they did it. My theory, you could go, this is the Woody Johnson, conspiracy route. He wanted to save money. Who knows? I have no idea if that was it. But if you're looking at schematically, they wanted guys like Will McDonald to take on a larger role this year. And they wanted to kind of replace internally, and the coaching staff is much higher on Michael Clemens than I think a lot of Jets fans are. I don't think most Jets fans thought that Michael Clemens could adequately replace that John Franklin-Myers role, and he can't. But the Jets coaching staff seems to believe he can. So I don't understand it at all. It really they're spinning it as if it was a cap saving move. It really wasn't, because they could have saved cap in other ways or just by restructuring his deal. So I don't know, man. It's just as baffling to me.
Yeah, and you mentioned Michael Clemens. It was kind of interesting seeing him specifically targeted on a lot of those big run plays that the 49ers ended up happening. It almost feels kind of like the Jets coaching staff was kind of gaslighting a lot of fans by claiming he was a 3-down guy, kind of an elite player. And, he's good, but he's not great. And I think the 49ers, part of their game plan was to exploit that, which makes things interesting going into next week against the Tennessee Titans, who we know they'll like to run the ball. And they were actually doing really well against the Chicago Bears until they got a few things didn't go their way special teams wise. But the first half, they were running all over Chicago, and that's where they had a lot of success. And it's interesting to see if they'll have that against the Jets. What are your takeaways of that preview? What's your preview, I guess, of that matchup with the Titans next week?
I think it needs to be a bounce back game for the defense. The Titans offense, they had some success running the ball. They don't scare me. Tony Pollard is fine. He's a fine player. Tyjae Spears is fine. It seemed like Pollard was more RB1 in Tennessee based on how they were used in week 1. The receiving core doesn't scare me. Will Levis doesn't scare me. The offensive line definitely does not scare me. I don't think that Titans offensive line, specifically the interior of that offensive line, is particularly good. They got like Lloyd Cushenberry at center. Peter Skoronski is young. He's got some upside, but he's still working out the kinks in his game. It's a very young and inexperienced Titans offensive line. And if the Jets defensive line is who they say they are, if this is Robert Saleh's defense and they want to live as the defensive line is one of their strengths, then they need to be better against the Titans, because the Titans do not have the same Kyle Shanahan scheme where they're going to be able to overachieve with mediocre talent outside of Trent Williams, of course, on that offensive line. The Jets defensive line should feast. Quinnen Williams should feast. You paid Javon Kinlaw to be your upgrade over Quentin Jefferson, he needs to feast against guys like Lloyd Cushenberry or Dylan Radins or whoever they got in the interior of that offensive line. And then you need guys like Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson to have better games because they were bad. They were really, really bad. They got bullied. And Will McDonald, you don't expect him to be a run defender. He wasn't offering much as a pass rusher in that game either. Jermaine Johnson is supposed to be a rock solid, very good run defender. And he was getting pushed around, not just by Trent Williams, but by Colton McKivitz as well. And this is a guy who, he was a Pro Bowler last year. I like Jermaine Johnson. This isn't me trying to trash talk Jermaine Johnson. He was a seventh alternate or whatever he was, Pro Bowler, and that's why he made the Pro Bowl. I think he's a very good player who is above average at a lot of things. I don't think he's great, and I don't think it's good that he's your best edge rusher right now on the roster. But he's better than what he put on tape in week 1, and we need to see that this week.
Yeah, I think I saw something that was was either 134 or 132 graded, pass rushers, and Jets had 3 of them towards the bottom of the barrel there with the aforementioned Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson, and actually I think it was Braden McGregor who was down at the bottom of that barrel too. So they definitely have to step up against the Tennessee Titans, and I mean that's kind of the team where they should be able to do it, right? I mean, we've seen Levis kind of struggle even when he doesn't have pressure, so let's hope that they can get pressure. Something else I'm looking at the offensive side of the ball is I want to see, Tyler Conklin get more touches, maybe Braylon Allen get more touches. It was absurd to me that I don't think either of those guys had even a play drawn up for them until the fourth quarter. What are your expectations on the offensive side of the ball going into Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with both things you just said. I'd love to see Tyler Conklin get more involved. I have been a big Tyler Conklin supporter over the last couple of years. I think he's severely underrated. This is a guy who is top 10 in amongst all tight ends in yards and yards and receptions over the last 2 years, I believe. And that's been with horrible quarterback play. I think that he is a very, very solid player that they need to get involved more. And yeah, the lack of Braylon Allen was very confusing. Breece Hall is a phenomenal running back. Wasn't a great game for him. He's still one of the best running backs in the NFL, but it was not a very good game for him. It was beyond just the run blocking, which the run blocking was poor, but I do think that Breece Hall was not great independent of that either. And you drafted a guy in Braylon Allen who I thought was the Jets' most impressive rookie in the summer. Of all the guys on the roster, this rookie class probably isn't going to contribute much in year 1. Allen is the guy you're hoping, because I don't think it's going to be Malachi Corley at this stage, unfortunately. So Allen's the guy you're hoping can make an impact of any of those guys in that rookie class in a year you're trying to compete for a Super Bowl. And from what I saw from him in the summer, he looked like a guy who's ready to compete right now. Like it was not even just the runs, it was the little things, the pass pro. The one play I always think about was the scramble drill with Tyrod. I forget which preseason game it was, but Tyrod rolling out to his right, Braylon Allen cuts off his route and breaks upfield, gets to where the marker is. That play got called back, but that's such a smart play for a guy who is quite literally the youngest player in the entire NFL. It was plays like that showed me he can play, and he should be playing right now. And it was really confusing to see the Jets in short yardage situations. They had the two-point conversion attempt that they just run up the gut with Breece Hall. They have a 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, and Braylon Allen's nowhere to be seen. You drafted a 240-pound running back. He's a bulldozer. You drafted him to be that guy, to be your short yardage guy, to be able to pass block on 3rd down. And I'm pretty sure he had 1 or 2 snaps before garbage time. I think it was just like he was in there to pass block, and that was it. I want to see more of him. I want to see more of Braylon Allen. I want to see him in those short yardage situations, because the Jets have been very bad in short yardage situations the last couple of years. The Jets coaching staff has been vocal about how they want Breece Hall to be able to grind out those tough yards more. Well, you drafted a guy in Braylon Allen who's hopefully supposed to do that. Let him do it.
Man, I can't agree more than that, because the whole time I'm frustrated. I'm like, why did you dress these guys if you're not going to play them? And it's not like we're talking like back end of the roster players either. Like, this is supposed to be your RB2. I don't know how many teams in the NFL use at least some type of multi-back system now. And listen, I know Breece Hall is elite. I know that he's a great running back, but at the same time, you're playing against a tough defense. Give another guy touches, change it up just a little bit, give him short yardage situations. It was absurd to me. The personnel decisions in that game really kind of boggled my mind a little bit. They played Mike Williams, I think, like 6 snaps. I understand he was going to be a decoy, but I think I really saw Corley out there either. So I don't know what their game plan is going forward with that. I mean, do you think Corley gets involved next week? Do you think Mike Williams gets involved next week this week? Because it's only Alan Lazard and Garrett Wilson were the only wide receivers who caught a pass,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure only 3 players on the Jets were targeted before garbage time, and that was Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, and Brees Hall. I'm pretty sure those were the only 3 players that were even targeted. I with Mike Williams, they're going to ramp him up. He will get involved more. I was definitely a little disappointed that he wasn't involved more in week 1, but yeah, he was basically just out there as a decoy, like you said. Malachi Corley, I am less confident of. My expectations for his rookie season are extremely low. The Jets drafted him to with the goal, with the intention, the expectation. I know Jets fans will kind of some Jets fans will kind of change the narrative with this, but the Jets drafted him to be their starting slot receiver week 1. That was the hope. The hope was that he was going to beat out Xavier Gibson for the starting slot job, which should not have been particularly challenging. This is not, Xavier Gibson is fine. He's not a particularly great slot receiver, and the Jets tried to talk him up in the summer and saying he's improved. Cool. He wasn't even targeted week 1, I don't think. But the hope was that Malachi Corley would beat him out. Not only did he not beat him out, he is wide receiver 5 or 6 right now. He is firmly buried on the depth chart behind the other guys ahead of him, and it's because they don't trust his route running. I didn't hate the Corley pick at the time. It wasn't my preference. There were other wide receivers who I would have preferred. Roman Wilson, I know, is a very popular name amongst Jets fans. That was somebody I would have preferred over Malachi Corley as well. It's nothing against specifically Corley. It's just the archetype of player that Corley is. There's a lot more failures than success stories in the NFL. For every Deebo Samuel, there's 3 Amari Rodgers, or whoever else you want to throw in there. Like there's just been a lot of guys who are gadget players who you're trying to turn into a wide receiver that don't work in the NFL. Now, this isn't to say that Malachi Corley can't be a successful player at this level. I don't know. What I do know is right now he's not at that level, and he's a project player in a year that the Jets are trying to compete for a Super Bowl. And you tried to spend a 2nd-round pick on him. They were trying to trade up into the 2nd round to get him. They used the 1st pick in the 3rd round instead. That's not somebody you really want sitting his entire rookie season in a year that you're trying to compete, especially given that your wide receiver room isn't good. Like it's not good. Outside of Garrett Wilson right now, because Mike Williams is still recovering, there's not much. So you'd hope that a day 2 wide receiver can make an impact and be able to see the field. But unfortunately, no, I don't expect to see much Malachi Corley moving forward. They'll probably try and get creative and drop some gadget plays for him, little end arounds, screens. I think we'll see that worked in. But as far as him actually playing wide receiver and running some routes, probably not going to see much of it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people didn't really like the article I wrote for X Factor that claimed that the Corley pick, there's a lot of more question marks than there are check marks for that Corley pick there. Not to mention late declare guys who aren't predicated on being able to run routes sufficiently, and they're more yak guys, especially small school yak guys who aren't abundantly successful, I guess would be the word, over the top success. That's a big question. Like we're not seeing like Cooper Kupp type of success from a small school. We're seeing Malachi Corley kind of struggle busing it, yardage, route rise, separation wise, and he's just getting everything like at or near the line of scrimmage and just bullying on other small school players. I thought it was an interesting pick. Like you alluded to, I would have had rather prefer like a Roman Wilson, somebody like that. But it's just interesting that they pinned him up as the next Deebo, and then they didn't even play him against a team that has Deebo. So I thought that was kind of ironic and funny in a way. But also I did want to get your opinion about kind of, I guess, still the elephant in the room months later, and that is Haason Reddick. He played hardball, man. He didn't show up game 1, lost the game check. Do you think he shows up game 2? What are your thoughts on that situation between Douglas, the Jets, and Reddick? Just give me your takes, Justin.
I have no idea. I've tried to approach this situation with logic from the start. There is definitely video you could find of me going back in April and May being like, yeah, he'll be there by training camp. Yeah, he'll show up. It doesn't benefit either side for him to continue to hold out. Both sides are incentivized to get this done as soon as possible. That means it'll work itself out. But here we are. It is September 10th at the time that we're recording this right now, and there is still no deal. And that defies all logic. The only person that knows when he's going to show up is Malachi Corley and anybody close to him. And I'm not even sure Malachi Corley knows at this point. Or Malachi Corley, what am I talking about? Or Haason Reddick. Haason Reddick is the only one who knows when Haason Reddick is going to show up. Got Malachi Corley in the brain. Unless Reddick is very close with Corley and telling him his details. But yeah, Haason Reddick is the only one who knows when Haason Reddick is going to show up. And I'm not sure again. I don't even know if he knows at this point. As for what the Jets should be doing, look, normally in situations like this, I tend to lean towards siding with the player more in holdouts. As long as the player is accurately evaluating their market, then it makes sense. Like Brandon Ayuk the holdout, I mean, it kind of dragged on a little bit longer than it probably should have. And you can maybe say maybe he should have made up his mind earlier, but he had teams willing to pay him a contract that initially the 49ers weren't willing to give him. At that point, sure, hold out. Try and get he knows his worth. Try and get whatever money you can get. CeeDee Lamb, similar situation. Every team in the world was going to pay CeeDee Lamb what he was looking for. Like if the Cowboys weren't going to pony up, another team was. The difference with Haason Reddick is that by all accounts, by every report that we've seen, there is not a team willing to give him the contract that he's looking for, which is reportedly $25 to $28 million a year. And I cannot blame them for a guy who is turning 30 years old in a couple of weeks. And there's not a great track record for paying speed rushers in their 30s. I'm not shocked at all. And I don't think the Jets should extend him for sure, especially with the other guys in the roster that they have to worry about. So I don't think the Jets should cave. I know everyone's going to be like, oh, the D-line didn't, it sucked in week one, so gives Reddick leverage. I don't think it does. I don't think everything I know about Joe Douglas tells me that he is a man of principle. He is not going to just overreact and emotionally react to week one, and he's not going to change his tune, and he probably shouldn't. That doesn't mean that the Jets are void of fault in this situation. I definitely think the communication has been very poor since the beginning. It feels very childish that it's like, hey, we're not going to negotiate until you get in the building. And Corley again. Reddick is like, we're not gonna show up until we have a new contract. That feels very childish. That feels very middle school-y. If a phone call is what solves this, if the Jets calling Haason Reddick's agent is what solves this, then do it. Then just do that. But I don't think that they should extend him. So ultimately, it's going to come down to him. The greatest lengths that he can go, and I checked with the CBA, and maybe somebody else knows more about this than I do. But from what I know, the greatest lengths he can go to is he can hold out until week 10. And then the Tuesday after week 10 is when he has to report. If he does not report by then his contract will toll to the next season. So he's not going to do that. I mean, I didn't think he'd do this, but he's not going to do that. He's not going to let his contract toll and be under contract next year with the Jets. That does not solve his issue at all. So that's the greatest lengths he can go to. If it's week 10 and Tuesday after that, then he can show up. Then in theory, he can, if he really is like so dead set against playing, he can try to fake an injury and just show up with like a soft tissue injury and try and get his own doctors to be like, hey, look, he can't play. And that would just get so messy. And then the league would get involved probably because the Jets would file a grievance. And in theory, that's how messy this can get. Will it get to that point? I hope not. I sure hope not, because it'd be better for everyone involved if he was here. But at this stage, I cannot predict what he's going to do because I don't think anybody knows where his, what his stance is, because his stance doesn't fully make sense to me. I don't see a benefit to what he's doing, but I don't know, man. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw a bunch of people like Jets fans and anybody else just like, oh, imagine if, they need Reddick so bad. This gives Reddick so much leverage. And I'm like, dude, Reddick's not great against the run either. It would have done very little for his like leverage. I mean, I'm in the same boat. Like I didn't, to be honest with you, I was probably I didn't really want Haason Reddick on the team. I much rather would have had them pay Bryce Huff. Homegrown guys, I'm always for that, instead of especially trading for a 30-year-old guy who's been on three separate teams in the past 3 years. It didn't bode well. And then when there were rumors that he declined a contract, the Jets offered him a contract, with the trade, and he declined it, and then they still traded for him. Seems kind of bizarre to me. I don't understand that portion. If that's true, who the heck knows? But man, it is absurd that it's kind of got into this point, and it kind of scared me a little bit too with the Michael Carter thing, because we heard Rich Cimini back in June saying that Douglas hadn't talked to them like at all, and then randomly, we saw that he just got re-signed, which he absolutely deserved, or extended, which he absolutely deserves. So it had me it gave me a little bit of hope that maybe JD's like putting out a front for the media and maybe doing stuff behind closed doors. But I kind of fell for that trap when Reddick was in Jersey for that philanthropic kind of signing that he was doing. So I was like, oh man, we're gonna get him week 1. That didn't happen. I don't even know if he goes this week. I'm really hoping it doesn't turn into like a week 10 thing. Do you think there's any way? So this is the other rumor that come out, I think it's from Cimini himself, that the Jets may end up trading him or trying to use him as a trade piece for some other place. They've said Las Vegas for Devontae Adams. Do you think that the Jets it's something that the Jets are looking into, and B, that it's possible to even do like that another team would even take him?
it's right now he's not going to get the contract that he's looking for from another team. So he would have to ease up on his demands if that was the case. Unless, I mean, anything can happen if Nick Bosa goes down tomorrow and the Niners are desperate for pass rush help. Maybe they change their mind. I don't know. Or not just using that as an example. It could be any team. It's definitely within the realm of possibility. I don't think the Jets are going to trade him unless they get what they believe to be fair value. And they gave up a 2026 third round pick. It's going to be a third. At this rate, it's definitely going to be a third round pick because he's not going to even play the required snaps if he continues to hold out. So I guess that helps the Jets there. But yeah, they gave up a 2026 third round pick to get him. So they're not going to give him up if they believe they are losing out on value. Now, sure, if you can flip him to the Raiders for Devontae Adams, great. But I don't see why the Raiders would do that, because if they're trading Devontae Adams, what do they want Haason Reddick for? That signals to me that they are not competing. Why are they trading for a 30-year-old pass rusher? I know the Raiders organization has made some interesting decisions in the past with some roster moves, but I don't think they would do that. So I don't think I think that's more of a pipe dream. It's feasible to me that he gets traded. If this continues to really drag out and he's just such a headache, then maybe they would do it. But they're also, you also have to keep in mind that when he walks in the offseason, assuming that he's not re-signed and extended, which I don't think he will be, when he walks, somebody's going to pay him. Some team's going to pay him something. It's not going to be the contract he wants, but somebody's going to pay him something. And the Jets are going to get a comp pick for that if they don't make other moves in free agency that cancel that out. So that's something Joe Douglas and the Jets are keeping in mind, that, hey, look, if Haason Reddick gets paid enough money, I don't know what he's going to have to show up at some point to get paid something. But if he shows up and plays well and then gets a big contract in the offseason, you might be able to recoup a third round pick in 2026 as a comp pick. So in that case, all of this was almost for naught. You just traded for Haason Reddick and maybe he gives you whatever he can give you, and then you almost cancel out the pick anyway. It'll be a little bit later than the third round pick would have been, but they're keeping that in mind too. So, if they're not going to trade him unless they believe it's fair value. So unless it's, more than the comp pick they think they might get or more than what they gave up to get him, I don't think it's going to happen. But it's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Yeah, I just hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's a nice little rainbow with a pot of gold, and everybody eats. The Jets get what they want, and he performs well. Reddick gets, his money that he wants. If they do, I don't think he's going to be here long term. I think this is kind of a one and done deal situation, at least with the way everything has been going so far. But hey, it'll be very interesting to see. But before we go, hey, I want you to give me a prediction on this Jets-Titans game. Final score. I just want to hear. I'm putting you on the spot here, Justin. Sorry, buddy.
Final score. Okay. All right. So my final score prediction for Jets-Niners, I did predict the Niners were going to win. I think I said like 27-21 or something. I don't know. It's on video somewhere. I forget what I said. But I will predict the Jets bounce back win. The Jets are a better team than the Titans. They should, on paper. I feel like we've been using that term for a long time now, but on paper, the Jets should win. I do think that the defense will bounce back. If the defense doesn't bounce back, then it might be not fully panic station, but it's going to be some alarms going off if they don't bounce back against Titans. So I'll say Jets win, say 24-14. No, 24-13. Defense gives up 3 scoring drives, holds them to 2 field goals. That seems more like the Jets defense than just giving up 2 touchdowns. So we'll say 24-13. I think the offense finds its groove a little bit more. I think Breece Hall has a bounce back game. I'm still concerned about who they're throwing to outside of Garrett Wilson. I'm not sure we're going to see that Allen Lazard as we just did in week 1. But I do think that the offense will find its groove and that the defense bounces back. I hope I'm not proven wrong. I don't want to be overly optimistic, but I want a comfortable win. I want a comfortable 2-score win, and I really do hope we get that.
Yeah, need something comfortable to get the confidence of Jets fans and the players where it should be heading into what's going to be a crazy travel schedule with those guys going forward. So, Justin, I really appreciate you taking out the time to come on the show. Make sure everybody listening right now is following Justin and the Jet Press. You guys know him from the Jet Press at the Jet Press. It's spelled exactly how it sounds. And you can follow Justin on Twitter as well at Justin T, as in, Tommy Jets, Fried on Twitter. Hey, he's the man of the show over there at the Jets Press. Justin, do you have any other lasting comments or anything to Jet fans before we get on out of here?
I would say that let's do our best. I know it's so hard as Jets fans because we've been through a lot. We've been through a lot over the years, and people older than me have been through a lot more. I would say let's do our best to not overreact to week 1. If they suck in week 2 and they suck in week 3, okay, maybe it's time to fire everybody. Panics, the alarms are going off. I would say that the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe, lost in week 1 last year.
Yes.
Right? Obviously, the Jets are not the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not shocked that the Jets lost by 2 scores to the defending NFC champs on the road in what is their hardest game of the year. Let's relax. Let's take a deep breath, and we had 16 more games to go. Pace ourselves. There's going to be plenty more things to be angry about in the foreseeable future. Let's hope for a bounce back. That's what I would say.
No, I love that. Like the wise words of Aaron Rodgers with the RELAX comments from years ago. I love that. Justin, thank you once again for stepping on the show. And for everybody else, hey, it's Tommy Jets, Thomas Christopher at Inner City Jets. This is the Jets Pulse. And make sure you guys are staying tuned for next week.